Rebecca, I look at the headlines here and you get the sense that, look, it feels like we've been here before.
It does.
Is there anything that you're seeing that says this time around could be different?
Yeah, I do think so. We're hearing that, and of course it's going to be announced by the president. He's going to have that all-important meeting face-to-face. But we're hearing now that basically maybe China's willing, as of the beginning of the January next year, with new companies to not have a joint venture structure required for businesses, American businesses that want to start and expand into China, which is unprecedented and
that
huge.
Seems like a significant leap for the Chinese.
It's huge. So we don't know exactly the structure of the deal. This is all just the, coming across the wires. And so we have to see what actually gets announced. Obviously, Steve Mnuchin didn't want to give away any thunder at his press conference that he just had, a little bit ago. But we're excited because this is what we get. This is really huge. We need to make sure that there's teeth. We need to make sure that it's enforceable and that how are we going to track it, trust but verify. But this is different. We've never had this before.
There's certainly going to be a lot of layers that we're going to be looking for in any kind of announcement. On the one hand, it sounds like, based on the Bloomberg report, there could be a delay in tariffs. How big of a catalyst is that, especially given that the December 15th tariffs would have been a huge burden on consumers? How much of what we're likely to see in the market will be about the details and the teeth that you pointed to in any kind of partial trade deal?
That's really what we were expecting. We were just expecting this to be a pause. We were expecting to say, okay, China's going to buy some more soybeans, and we are not going to escalate next week, October 15th, and then we're not going to escalate in December. So that we were all sort of just expecting a pause, at least I was, and thinking that this was just going to be a sort of not a real. This is really a shock, to be honest with you, to get something that actually talks about where we can go. And one of what I call the 7 deadly sins that Peter Navarro is always structuring, of the 7 things that China does that we need to stop, joint venture, and it was not something that we expected to hear today. So it's interesting, and we have to get the details, but it's exciting news.
I think a lot of investors will take that with cautious optimism, if you will, until the details are announced.
That's exactly
Obviously, all of this is kind of weighing into where the Fed sees the outlook as well. We've heard Jay Powell talk a lot about the trade uncertainty and trying to navigate things on that front. Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari telling Yahoo Finance yesterday that while economic fundamentals seem to be good, the risks of a recession have increased. Take a listen.
The good news is most Americans still have jobs. Wages are slowly growing, so families have a little more money. They're spending that money. That's 70% of the economy. So still the economy is in a decent place, but the risks absolutely have increased to the downside.
Do you agree with that?
Well, he's looking at the global slowdown, right? And we do have a global slowdown. Germany obviously has a major pullback in manufacturing. You've got Italy, you've got Japan, you've got China has had the worst economy in 27 years because of the trade war. So clearly we are not in a silo. We will be affected with a global slowdown. So he's actually, in listening to his pieces and what he specifically, shared with Yahoo Finance, I thought it was really interesting that he's talking about being more preemptive than the Fed has typically been. The Fed is usually looking at only target inflation rates and benchmarking around that, and they follow the Phillips curve. And it was interesting, they also had a discussion about the Phillips curve specifically. He didn't want to really get wonky and say that, but he said, listen, usually full unemployment makes inflation. We haven't seen that. He doesn't actually believe that we have full employment yet, because he wants to count people that maybe aren't necessarily looking for work. He doesn't believe in necessarily the numbers. So he is talking about, listen, in December of 2015, we preemptively started to raise rates, and now we should preemptively continue to cut rates. My concern is that with the federal funds rate at 1.75 to 2, how much gas are we going to have in the tank left if we're cutting when we don't actually necessarily need a cut right now?
Now, prior to the minutes being released this week, we did hear from the Fed chair talking about an expansion in the balance sheet. There's been some debate of whether that's QE or not. We did get some news today saying the Fed's going to begin the initial buying of $60 billion in Treasury bills. Is this QE? How should we be looking at it? And I guess the ultimate question is, does it matter how we define it?
Well, I think it does matter, because QE is obviously an entire economic school of thought that some people disagree with and a lot of people don't.
Well, that would also signal that the Fed sees a slowdown.
That's exactly right. So I think this is, interestingly enough, they talk about this was more around the liquidity needs of paying third quarter taxes. All American businesses remitting taxes to the IRS around the same time frame makes liquidity in banks dry up really quickly. But we've had that, forever. We always have third quarter taxes, and this is the first time this has happened in 10 years that we've had this sort of infusion. So I don't know if it's not a QE technically, but at the same time, it is interesting, and I'd like to get more into the details of why this was necessary.
What do you think that suggests, though?
Well, I do think that the Fed maybe they don't want to cut rates as much as Trump wants them to cut rates because they want to stay out of the politics of it, but they are seeing some slowdowns and they're trying to see what else they could potentially do.
Okay, Rebecca, great to have you on today.
Thank you.